Yeah. So we're holding Siman Tzadiches, we're holding the last Seif Tes. But before we go into Seif Tes, which I think I'm going to leave most of it for Thursday, it's a complex sugya, even though it may not appear to be. For some reason, the Meforshim, even though they cover the basic explanation of what's going on in the Chaber's words, it's a lot more than what the eye sees. A lot more. And it would be too much for us to cover in one night. I thought we would, but we're going to have to leave it for another shir. So instead, I'm going to go over just a few nekudas for clarification from the Ramah in Seif Ches, and then go into an introduction of Seif Tes. In the Ramah of Seif Ches, we spoke about Isur Machmas Atzmoi versus Isur Balua concerning a particular food item that is Avida Letamo. Avida Letama means that it's used for flavoring. Used for flavoring means that it's pretty strong. In other words, it is stronger than your average food item that if it falls into a kedera, it will give off its tam. So the shiurim that we've covered till now concerning tam have been shishim. Anytime you have more than shishim, we learned that it's because of a chumrah, the rabbanon, like meya or masayim, by orla, by truma, right? Or if it's an iser b'mashu, that it's not even bottle. So it's rare that we see something that is not your standard iser, that it requires much more. We will be seeing some of them when we talk about chaticha ruyel iskabed, dover sheyesh lo matirim, situation where dover shebeminyan, that is counted, birya. Right? Are you familiar with them? Have you heard of them? Some of them are not bottled at all, and they too are midrabanan. Why? Because midaraisa we know by now that for the most part, most isurim are bottled either berod, or if it's a question of tam, then shishim takes care of the tam. Chometz is also b'mashal, right? That's an extra chumrah. That's an extra chumrah, right? So that's pretty black and white as far as Bitul and Isra, where we learn out. We've covered that at the beginning. Which, by the way, reminds me, for those of you who are interested, we can do a review after we finish a Siman or after we finish several Siman. It all depends or after we finish the whole Taaruvot. It's a question, as to when do we get the most benefit out of it. So I'll leave that up in the air as to when a review of the main points, the main highlights should be done, right? In case, especially if there's going to be a test on this, if somebody's going to be tested on this. Already. Yeah. Okay. So, right, I leave it up to you. So, what we were introduced to flavoring that is very, very strong. That which is very, very strong is usually a form of a spice. And we said that these particular types of isurim that are ovid letama is not batal afilu be'elef. Why? Because tam ke'ikar, and since tam is ke'ikar, as long as you feel the tam, supposedly, that's the real iser. Although, according to others, whenever there is tam beyond shishim, it's a tam kolush, it's a very, very soft, diluted tam, and that's not tam ke'iser. That's not tam ke'ikar. And therefore it's bottled, even though you do sense a little bit of the flavoring. But here, since this is intended to flavor, it's a very, very powerful flavor, it could be that it's not bottled. Why? Because you're feeling the real thing even after beyond shishim. So shishim is good most of the time. It doesn't mean it's good all the time. And that's why there are some poskim who hold that for those things that are bottled with shishim, if you actually feel the tam, it's still asr. It's still asr. Just because you have shishim doesn't guarantee that it should be asr. But that's only according to certain poskim.
And that is now, it's still now the Rabbanan.
No, some will say it would be the rice if it's a dover of, if it's a vida letam at least. It's a vida letam at least. Because then the flavor is mamish strong and there even beyond shishim. Now, a point was raised about this David Avida Letama. One of the chilukim is if this is an Isur Machmas Atzmoi or an Isur Balua, if you recall. Isur Machmas Atzmoi is when the spice itself is asr, and Isur Balua means that the sharpness of this flavoring is not asr. Dam in melach, as an example, as we will later on see the mechamer. Dam in melach. Melach is not asr. Melach happens to be salt, but it happens to have absorbed dam. So the dam is the asr, but the dam is not sharp. What is sharp? What is very strong? It's the salt, but the salt is not asr, but the salt has absorbed the dam. That's not what we're talking about here, right? The Ramah says, Im asurim machmas atzmon, einam betelim meshishim. Which means what? If they are by themselves asr, but if they are, isur balua, that means they have been absorbed into something else, then they would be batal b'shishim. However, we did say that it may be a form of chanan, right? That this whole salt could become asr for those who hold chanan b'shar isurim, and therefore you would need 60 keneged the whole melach. All right, but it's still batal. This is much better versus the other situation where it's not batal afilu be'alef. Okay, but it's batal. So this distinction, we ran a little bit into trouble to understand what's the difference between really isur balua and isur machmas asma when it comes to a spice. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
What you just said, if on the oraisa or the rabbanon?
It's a rabbanon.
So is that because why should we, now the salt itself is an invalid chanan, why would we only require 60 against the seduced for the sake of the sharpness?
That's the chidush here. That's
because the chanan is the rabbanon.
No, not because of the chanan. The isur balua.
If we call the salt, you said, as
right.
a possibility of opinion.
Right. In Shar Yisurim.
Then now the salt is a balua. It's a.
You're right. That's what we brought out.
So then
last week.
Then say 60.
Right.
Where otherwise, if the salt was really not just a chanan, right, but it was an ifnei atzmo in its own right.
Right.
Then 60 wouldn't be enough.
Right. That's.
So we say 60 because I'm asking. We
right.
say 60 because the chanan is only the rabbanon.
Yes, because chanan is a rabbanon. Right.
Okay,
that's all we say is 60. But we did bring up this point, and that's what we need to clarify because I was not clear enough on that. You asked a very good question. I mean, where do you have a tavlin, a spice, machmas atzma? Remember the question?
Yes, very well. Yeah, must.
Yeah, right. So even though they proposed that an isur machmas atzma in some ways can be when there's not enough to be mevatel the original isur. In other words, the isur is an isur balua in itself, somewhere in a piece of meat.
What do you mean? There's an example.
Let's just give a quick example, even though it's not related to this. Let's take any isur chaylev that is in a piece of meat. The meat is not big enough to be mevatel the chaylev, so the whole chaylev becomes asur. The whole meat becomes asur. You don't need chanan for this. It's partial because it's not bottle. It's like we said before, the heter becomes isur, just like the isur becomes heter. Right. So that's a form of isur balua, but the whole thing becomes a shtickle piece of isur right now.
So what would be the example where, according to this?
No, where there's shishim.
But when it's shishim, it's all. I don't have to worry about the balua either. Because if
I do. That's what.
It's already mevatel.
You're right. I do.
Why is it batal?
Okay.
No, if the piece of meat has 60 against the chaylev, the meat itself has 60.
Yeah, I'm assuming it doesn't have.
Yeah, but in that particular example of chaylev and meat, I don't have to be concerned if there's shishim. So the question is, I brought out.
That's what I'm asking. So
where would we?
Where?
So that's where I proposed. It's just my idea. I proposed. What happens if you have a form of isur balua where the blia itself is a tavlin?
So that
you see,
the
Ramah is distinguishing between isur machmas asma, which we all know what it is. I mean, we don't know an example yet. I'm going to get to that, but we know what machmas asma means. It by itself is asur, versus if this spice is mutter. The spice is mutter, like salt, but the isur in the salt is the blood. That's not an isur machmas asma. Right. The salt is okay. We didn't have that in mind, the Ramah says, when we said that it's not batal be'elav. It has to be on its own, by itself. Yes. It has to be hot, spicy, very strong flavor, and also, of course. If what's making it very, very spicy, very flavoring, is mutter, it's like the salt. It just happens to be that it is being carried by the salt, like dam. No, that's batal b'shishim. Okay? So that example of isur balua is what? that the Isser itself is a Blia, the salt is mutter, right? And therefore, we don't have a problem with it. Why don't we have a problem with it? Because the salt is not a problem. The blood is. In my proposal, I suggested what happens if the Isser Bolua itself is a spice.
Why do I need to be? Then let this
How can that happen? Spice is para.
The spice itself is Bolua in a piece of meat.
Let me, for him, just take it easier.
Right.
Musk is something that grows in the deer, in a certain time
Right,
of the year.
certain time of the year.
Certain land.
Right.
If they didn't shecht it kosher, deer kosher,
Yeah.
if it wasn't shecht kosher, then I would think spice derived from
Nevela, that's a nevela.
musk. Yeah, the musk derived from a nevela would
Yeah.
be Isser.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of talking
No, I'm going to get to that.
think so.
No, I'm not.
Because they also
No,
said-
I'll tell you soon.
Why not? Why would you exclude
By the
musk?
way, when I do review with you some examples, we're all going to blame each other for not having done a thorough inside review of the Shach and Taz. Had we done so,
So it's
no, but I'm going to get to that one step at a
why
time.
don't we do it then?
No, because we can't skip around. Okay? But what should have happened is we should have gone through the Shach, perhaps a little bit inside, then we would have realized what the Ramo is talking about. But anyway, before we get to that, I was proposing another situation, another scenario, really, of an Isser Balua, where the Isser Balua in itself is a spice. I don't know, cumin, whatever, some spice that is very, very strong, and somehow it's usher. Okay? How? We'll find out in a minute. Okay? How it is usher, the cumin, we'll find out in a moment.
Kin?
Yes?
My question?
Right.
Why do I need this as an Isser? Why do I need that alua?
Okay. Because the Ramo made a point. The Ramo made a point that we're talking about an Isur Machmas Atzmoy versus an Isur Below. Now, his point is not what I'm saying. His Poshet Pshat point is that if that Isur is an Isur Below, and what's causing the problem is heter salt, I don't have to be concerned, it's shish. What I propose is a different scenario, obviously, that the Ramo did not have in mind here. Nevertheless, I think it's a good question. It's an interesting scenario. What happens if this Isser, which is a spice, which is Asr for some reason, is not by itself? It somehow has been absorbed into a piece of meat, and this salty piece of meat, or this spicy piece of meat, fell into a Gdeira. Okay? Now, before we get into the Gdeira, we also said, we wanted to say that because this spice was absorbed in a piece of meat, that there's no shishim against the spice, so the piece of meat became usher.
And if there was 60, it wouldn't help?
No,
Because we say if it's spicy and intrinsically Isser, 60 doesn't help.
exactly.
I lost you when you but I lost you.
Right. There was a spice that was absorbed into a piece of meat.
Like regular spice,
Right?
garlic.
Absorbed into a piece of meat.
Intrinsically Isser.
Right.
That's the point.
Right.
It's not just a spice.
And this piece of meat became also because of the spice.
Well, the spice itself and a
Yeah.
property that.
Yeah, I'll talk about that next, right? And therefore, it's not misbatel. Whether it's not misbatel because there's no shishim, or because it's a spice.
Yeah.
Exactly, it makes no difference. But it's usr. The whole thing right now is usr.
But if it's a spice team, isn't the issue anymore.
Right. But I wanted to use that scenario I'll explain why. I'm going back to what we discussed last week. This piece of meat right now fell into a pot with other meat. So now in this pot of other meat, goulash, I no longer have a spice that is usr. I have a spice that is balua in a piece of meat. It's a blia. This piece of meat has an isur balua in it that has transformed that whole piece of meat to usr.
Your spice are in there.
Yes, let's assume. Let's assume chanan. Let's assume it's spicy. Regardless.
Well, then
But-
the meat itself, then the piece of meat is done with the spice.
okay, fine.
So you need the whole thing.
Right. Well, whatever. Yeah, that's not my question here. The point here is this spice is no longer by itself in the Gdera. It is in a piece of meat falling into a Gdera. This piece of meat has an Isur Balua in it.
And that Isser Balua happens to be spice.
And in this case, this Isur Balua is the spice, as opposed to the example of the Ramah, where the Isur Balua is not the spice.
What do you mean, Ramah?
The Ramah's example of Isur Balua is dam in melach. He says, don't worry about that, because the melach is heter. Dam is not spicy.
So basically your question is, if the Isser spice fell into the second Kedera
Right.
without being absorbed in a piece of, or now that it fell into the second, it was absorbed in a meat.
That's correct.
Does that make a difference?
Yes, does it make a difference? Right, that's what I wanted to say.
Does the piece of meat either amplify the spice such that,
No,
or does it reach the effectiveness of the spice?
No, nothing to do with reducing the effectiveness.
In terms of you need,
It may, that yes, it may or may not. But I'm backtracking on something I said last week.
It's not usually
In Tzadik Ches, when the Rama speaks about Bamilsu Davido Letamo, something that is intended for flavoring, it's never going to be diluted, annulled, even by 1,000.
I say dam.
No, that's the Meforshim say. As the example of Isur Bolua is like the example given to us later in the Mechaber himself, where Dam is in Isur, but where is this Dam?
Oh, I see.
The Dam is in salt.
Spicy.
Oh, but the salt is spicy, is mutter. What we're talking about, Milsa David Latama, is when the Isser itself is spicy.
But it doesn't give it.
No. Mechaber doesn't.
Where else?
This is all the Ramah, right over
I
here.
want to know where the dam and Melicha is. I didn't-
Later on, in Taaruvot, later on we have that. Yeah.
Well, can we go to Rebbe that last week that this case of 1,000 different from other cases of because they're 1,000, it'll never be.
Right.
Whereas this time of 1,000 means as long as you can still notice the taste.
That's
And
correct.
of course, if the salt or the
That's a very good
spice
point.
involved-
When we say 1,000, it doesn't necessarily always mean never. The word never.
in our case here, that's what it means.
Yeah, it means that
You said that last week.
Yes, that's 60, very good. 60 is not going to be enough. You may need 300, 400, 500, who knows? Which is a very good point that it's good you raise it now because that leads into what I'm about to say. So what did we say before? That an Isser, a spice can make the whole piece is Usser if there's not enough against it.
Or in our case.
Or in our case, if it's Hanan anywhere, or if it's a spicy, as long as you can
still
play.
notice the taste.
Yeah, either way. But that scenario where the entire piece is transformed to Isser is not really what the Ramah had in mind. Okay? I'm going to tell you soon what the Ramah had in mind concerning your question of what's the situation where the Isser, the Tavlin, is Usser. What kind of a spice is Usser? Before we get to that, all right? But that's not. I thought we could use that, but that's not necessarily what he's talking about because that scenario is a different scenario. One more time.
Your scenario, though, quick answer.
Yeah.
So if it now the which is usher was absorbed in a piece that fell into.
Did you all get that?
the pot.
Right. Absorbed into a piece of meat and fell into a pot.
In that pot,
Right.
if I can still taste of the usher spice, then wouldn't the whole pot be pitted as long as I still taste of the absorbed usher?
Right.
And once I can no longer taste in the pot, would it not become permissible once it's alone? Or as long as I can taste the meat that fell inside, it's
Well,
still
right.
so
My
I can-
scenario does not necessarily mean that it's going to be mutter b'shishim.
Right, as long as I can still taste. No, but
Exactly.
my question, let's say you
Right.
fell into
That's
a
the
pot.
bottom line. It's not going to necessarily be shishi.
No, it still could be also. The reason I presented the scenario, the only reason I presented my scenario of a spice being absorbed into a piece of, then falling into a gedera, is for completely, totally different reason. It's salty, why? It's salty, it's flavor. It won't be bottle. No. Can I use a kefela to taste it? That's all. Why? Because in Tzadik Gimel, the Mechaber says, and Beis Yosef actually brings it down, that anytime you have an Isur Balua, even the Ramban would be maskim. You can use a kefela if there's less than shishim. Less than shishim. In Isur Balua, remember in a pot, you cooked meat in a Melicha pot or milk in a Fleishike pot, right? There's no tam lefgam, no problem. It's benoisim tam, which is interesting. Over there, the Mechaber doesn't say give it to kefela. It just says it's benesinas tam. But the Meforshim say, what does the Mechaber mean? They say you actually give it to kefela to taste. So Mechaber is fine. The Mechaber, we know that you can always give a kefela to taste, right?
This is where you have one pot of meat and a milk
Right,
pot, right? And,
right.
And it's not
No,
it's a
right.
benyomo pot, and,
Just the pot. All you have is a blia of the pot.
but it's a benyomo and...
Right, exactly.
So
It's a
the
benyomo.
issue is-
So the Meforshim say over there, based on Beis Yosef explains that in that case it's an Isur Balua. It's not a real Isur. There's no real meat in the pot. We want to taste the milk. We want to taste, right? Let me read it to you again. Inside,
What's the difference here?
One second. Dero shebishel bo basar lo yivashel bo cholav im bishel bo besoik me'eis le'eis also benoisen tam. Right, so you have a meat pot, a fleshke pot, and you cook dairy. Besoik me'eis le'eis. You have to taste it. Now, it's a big help if all you do is taste it, because according to the Ramah, tzorach l'shar keneged kol hagdera. You need to figure out 60 against the hokadera, and as we've covered this before, usually you don't have that. That means the whole thing you have to throw in the garbage. There's no bitul most of the time. But according to the shita that you can taste it, you can get away with it.
The Mechaber says yes.
Yes, as he always does. Most of the time he does, yes, right. So the Shach says, what do I mean, as the Mechaber usually says. But if you read on, I think the Beis Yosef and other Meforshim say that even the Ramban, even those shitas who hold that you cannot use a kafela for under shishim, that is, here they would be maskim, because it's an isur balua. It's not a real isur by itself. It's an isur balua. Okay? Did you notice the difference? It's an isur balua. It's not real isur. It's not like you have a piece of meat falling into the milk or milk falling into meat.
But where the lenience come from? Tam ke'egah. So if it's an Isser Balua, we own the Tam here. It's not even an Isser Balua, it's a Blia.
It's a Blia.
In other words, the substance of the Isser wasn't absorbed.
Right.
The only remnants of the Isser is the taste that remains.
Right.
Without any substance.
Right.
But we say Tam ke'egah d'oraisa. So if Tam ke'egah d'oraisa, it's no less strict than the presence of the substance itself. So where do we have now all of a sudden the basis for a kula regarding even under 60? The Rambam would agree you can use.
Right. What's the basis of the kula? Well, remember, there's no real kula here. It's all it is being allowing the kefela to taste it, which in itself.
We're not being as machmir as in the other.
Exactly. That's all. That's all.
So
in other words,
why are we being less
right.
strict?
In this particular case, where it's only an isur balua, not the real isur itself, apparently that's what he says. Everybody or some of the shitas say that you would be able to be soymech, even the chiddush is even if there's less than shish, to see, because maybe there isn't such a real tam. All it is a isur balua. Maybe there's not so much tam after all. If it's the real thing, then we assume there is tam. You can't be soymech on him completely. It's questionable whether you should or not. We know that there is. Here. We don't really know if there is tam.
That's not how
Okay?
we usually hold, though. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's how we've learned all the time.
That's correct.
Tam ke'eger is the same as tam ke'eger.
Yeah.
So it's going to be.
But remember, the halacha of kafela really is acceptable to everybody. In a sense, it is an acceptable.
The Ramah?
It is. The Ramah says we're not noyek to do it. It's not out of the question. Remember, the Ramah never said we don't rely on it today. By the way, there's a whole diyun, there's a whole discussion why we don't rely on it today according to the Ramah.
Right.
In other words, but it's not something that it's totally against the rules. The Ramah doesn't understand.
Even Chaim says we would agree.
Yeah, but that's only today. That's only today. In other words, the idea of using a kafela, it's brought down in the Gemara.
Right.
Right. It's not something
Out of this world.
Right.
But it doesn't explain why today we make a distinction between the two cases. I'd like to ask you with speculation two possibilities.
Right.
Maybe one possibility is if the substance itself is and not only the taste,
Right.
then there's always the possibility the taste was not released evenly throughout the food.
Okay.
That the kefela might take a place in the pot where the substance didn't go that far. And you'll say there's no taste, but when I come to eat it, maybe I'll get a nice piece of chalif right in my mouth.
Okay.
There's a possibility.
A possibility.
If I only have taste, I don't have to worry about some of the substance lingering around in a corner and having preserved its taste in full. So maybe therefore I can rely more on his taste report because I don't have a substance as an additional item to worry about. I'm wondering whether that could possibly be an explanation.
Yeah, it could be. We have to look into it maybe a little bit more. All we do know is that the blia in a pot, even though we do hold not benat be isser, in words, it's not a question of not benat here necessarily. Right. By basar b'cholov, it could be a little bit. It may have something to do with not benat in that example. But this concept would still apply everywhere. That's why I'm not using not benat as a possibility, because in isser everybody would agree it's not a question.
So by an isser balua, it would still be possible to use it. It would have to be a basar b'cholov.
Right. Yeah. As long as you can identify the tam. But that's what the Beis Yosef says. The Beis Yosef says that they would agree even with that because it's less of an issue.
And another question, another possibility to explain
Right.
the difference in our days between the Tom K'ig versus substances in.
Yeah.
If the substance is in, then there's always the possibility that, let's say, absorbed some milk and gave it back off, which the kfela wouldn't be able to. The milk tastes like milk, even though it is hanan, and is now asering the other.
Right, in that situation,
So
yes.
if the substance is there, the report of the kfela saying, I don't taste any, would not necessarily indicate that the milk is permissible. Whereas, if it's only tam balua, I don't have the problem that there's a piece of meat that absorbed the milk and gave it back off. So that I'm only worried about the presence of the teeth. I'm no longer worried about the presence of milk that is hanan that I can't identify. So maybe that's what allows me to be
In the
more
case of
lenient
in the case of
in
Hanan,
balua rather than
could be,
Basar
yeah,
B'Challah.
could be.
And according to the ones who hold by Hanan by Bashar Asurim, the same would apply also. So the Ramah,
Yeah.
that would explain the Ramah. So
Right.
he holds Hanan Bashar Asurim, so he wouldn't want to rely on a kfela if the substance is present. So are you saying then the Ramah himself also in such kfela tasted?
Could be, yes, sure. Yeah, according to the one, the Ramah seems to be saying that we never use a kfela. So that's why I didn't say the Ramah would, but the Raman would. In other words, they wouldn't have opposition towards it so much, obviously, because the Belia is less of an issue than the real thing. Could be that we don't rely on him when it's the real Isser. Here, it's not so much of an issue. It's not as strong. But anyway, that's why I proposed this scenario that when the spice is inside a piece of meat, maybe it has the din of an Isser Balua. Based on that, that's the only reason I mentioned that. Would it
I
make
could rely on a kfela.
yeah, you can resurrect. But you know why it's not so necessary to propose that? You know, it doesn't, according to the Isser V'Heter. The Isser V'Heter says as follows: when you do not know if this tafshil, the Shach brings this down, and we mentioned it. According to the Isser V'Heter, if you do not know if there's flavor here, maybe it's gone. You have 250 times against the thing. Or you have less, whatever. You don't know if there is or not, right? According to the Isser V'Heter, he says you're allowed to ask a kefela to taste it.
Kfela?
Yeah.
Or
By David Ovid Letamo. Ovid Letamo, he says, well, you know what? It is spicy, but I made a big Yore, big Deah. I made a big pot, and we did say that sometimes in a very, very large pot, we for sure don't have the tam. But you don't want to take a chance. It's David, it's Milsa David Letamo. According to the Isser V'Heter, the Shach says you would be able, even though Isser Balua, no scenario of mine. The Isser V'Heter says you can give it to kefela if you're in doubt. Why would you be in doubt? Because it's a big pot. In a small pot, you shishim is not enough. Okay. But this is a big pot. Can I take my chance and give it to kefela? The Isser V'Heter would say yes, but not the Pri Chodosh. Because how did we start last year? We started off with this machloikas. Milsa David Latama, is it a doraisa or a rabbanon? If it's a doraisa, then it's tam ki'iker problem. If it's a derabbanan, it's all it is a derabbanan. Why not give it to a kefela just like anything else? So the Shach said, according to this already, if there would be any doubt, you would be able to give it to a kefela.
So we have the Sidas.
Yes.
The Sidas who argues up.
Yeah.
But if that was the case, then all the Rabbanon should be mutter by. All the Rabbanon should be mutter. Chicken that was cooked with milk should be mutter.
I looked at that shop. I looked at part of the shop and I saw on the sheet it says a goy.
A goy, Masech lefi tumoy.
A goy is not
Right, okay, so we spoke about that.
right.
You always need a... Right, not necessarily, you're right. A kefela does not...
A goy and two different
Right,
things.
right. When we've learned till now about the heter of giving a goy to taste, we said that some shittas hold that it has to be a kefela. It just can't be Masech lefi tumoy by itself. Right, not all. Right, it could be that by giving it to a goy by itself, without kefela would be enough too. Can you taste any flavor in it?
There's a lot of different positions.
That was a big shear. Remember that? That was a big shear we had.
Oh, sorry, I meant
No. I don't know if you hear. That was a very, very big shear. A very big shear about nemonas, about how much trust do we give a goy? Do we give him more trust because he's a chef?
right.
Okay. What if he was not a chef? Well, it depends. Rashi, Tosis, right? Depends on the shitas. What do you really, really need? You need both conditions, or just one is enough?
When the shop says a goy, what does it mean?
He means a kefela. Because the ordinarily in Hilchos Taaruvot and Basar B'Chalov, when the idea of giving it to a goy to taste, the word kefela comes up. Goy is used by agunas. Masiach lefi tumoi. Here we're talking about food, flavor. Got to know what it tastes like. Imagine giving a goy from the street now. What do you taste? I don't know. A chef, somebody who knows about flavor, might tell you, I can taste the pepper, I can taste the cumin, I can taste the salt, right? So people who know about food would have a better idea, indicator, if this is really...
So when the Shach uses the term goy, just any
I don't think so. Yeah. Does he say goy here? I don't recall what the Shach says.
I said goy.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you see?
I'm looking for it right now. We read the Shach.
Yeah, he says like this. He brings down Lo'eve kachov Masiach lefi tumoi. So you're right. Yeah, but he's quoting here somebody. But this is based on the Isur v'Heter, like we just said. Since it's Isur v'Heter holds that the whole thing of Milsa David al-Tamos Midrabanon, so according to him, if you're in doubt whether there is a tam or not, it's a bigger pot than the average pot, you would be able to give it to a goy or to a kafela.
And you're saying goy or a kafela.
Depending how you hold, if you really need a kafela or not.
Here we have it. But there is a maharsha, they quote, Gilyon maharsha,
right.
It says katav, dehu hadin kafela, uman, ne'eman, afilu lo Masiach lefi tumoi. So it's either a goy Masiach
lefi tumoi or a kafela, even. Okay, very good. You hear that? You heard that? In other words, if it's a kafela, you don't need Masiach lefi tumoi. If it's a goy, then you need Masiach lefi tumoi. That's based on what we've discussed in the past of how much nemanas is there. You have to have at least Masiach lefi tumoi if he's not a kafela.
Is that a marsha on?
Yep, that's a marsha being quoted on that particular.
Okay.
A marsha?
Marshal. Gilyone, not marshal. Gilyone marsha. Yeah. Okay, fine. Yeah, no, I have it over here. Let me see.
Is that the one or
no, this is the. What's that? That's a.
Yes, I see it over here.
Yore Deah, Shulchan Aruch with summaries of the Taz of the Shach and footnotes at the bottom. Our Shulchan Aruch with summaries of the Taz of the Shach with explanatory footnotes.
We didn't have that in our that comment.
Some people have it.
Yeah, but here he adds the Gilyon Marsha writes at the end the Hainu kan the yesh yoser mishishim. But b'pochos mishishim, if it's less than 60, gam b'drabanan lo samchinan.
That's his opinion.
That's his opinion, but that's what I was adding. That in my scenario, where if it's an Isur Balua, maybe even less than Shishim, everybody would agree you could use a kafela.
Now, interesting.
Maybe, yes.
They also explain the Shach.
Right.
They bring you Ot katav b'shem ha'or zarua imeno yadua imashim ta'amoda.
That's what I meant. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so there seem to be two sources.
Based on the Isur v'Heter, when we don't.
Or is it the same?
No, it's based on that. Based on the Or Zarua that it's midrabanan, he says. Kosav oid sham v'soifa kalal, right? That's the Isur v'Heter, right? The imenu yodu margishim tamo olam mati b'chiyei gavno.
So the Isur v'Heter once brings his own, and then brings down the Or Zarua. That's what it seems to be.
Could be.
Well, katav b'shem ha'or zarua. Ot katav is the Isur v'Heter. He also wrote in the Niddah, yeah?
Right. That's all one thing. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Anyway, that's where we left off with the Milsa David al-Tamo. Now, as far as your question is, where do you have a spice that is also machmas atzmoi? And really, the Shach and the Taz, they all bring different examples. Based on the Shach, we're talking about a tavlin of avodah zora or of orla.
Oh, very good.
Okay, he makes it simple. According to the Taz, in the name of the Isur v'Heter, we could be talking about a tavlin or melach shel hekdesh. In this kind of situations, unusual situations, that's where you have machmas atzma. But you're otherwise right. Most spices are not also machmas atzma. What do they have? It's a spice.
Well, but musk would be.
If musk is considered a spice, if it is a spice, if it's one.
Yeah,
it is. The question is how strong it is.
That's a good question.
Yeah. But I'm sure there are. There are other situations where the tavlin or whatever it is would be asur machmas atzma for some reason. So that's an answer to the question of what's the heichetimse, what's the situation where there would be isur machmas atzma. Now, another idea before we go into the next seif, just a couple more points. The Shach brings down a song in the name of the Torah's Chatas that if melach and tavlin, any spice, fell in, and they're also machmas atzman, and they fell in other melach and tavlin, so you have min b'minoi. So even though they are a spice and it's ovid latama, but they're falling in min b'minoi, it's botol b'shishim.
the Rabbanan you need to.
Yeah.
It's a normal scenario.
Right. Normal moment, but of course, but it's shishim. It's not. It would not be a filu be'elef lo bottle, even though it's salt, even though it's tavlin, but it's falling into its same kind. Why? Now keep this in mind when we go into the next seif. It's going to make a little bit of a difference. We are very much concerned most of the time about tam. Tam is going to be.
Can I add one more thing from
Yeah,
the sheets? It's
sure.
very interesting.
Right.
On what you just said.
Right.
They say here the Rabbi Elyahu argues in the Niddah.
I was going to. That's the next point. No, that's the next point.
I didn't understand the 60 because
If you have salt or tamim, which is milsa davida latamo, it is intrinsically. But if it falls into other spices of the same kind, min b'minoi, it's only bottle b'shishin. But Rabbi Kiva Eger, I saw, brings down in the name of Pri Chodosh. If you have a Shulchan Aruch, you can see Rabbi Kiva Eger, he brings down the name of Pri Chodosh, and Minchas Yaakov, he says over here, that they're choylek, that according to the Pri Chodosh, you would be even asu b'minoi. Why? Because the whole shear of Milsa David Latama is based on minoi ben sheminoi. In other words, we calculated, the whole calculation is based on be'eno minoi. The figuring of the tam, whether it's strong or not strong enough, is always based on eno minoi. So,
in other words, if I understand what you're saying is, why do I need the Rabbanan Dikasi in Bemino? Because Be'eno Mino I need 60. So the Rabbanan in the Mino I also need 60. So where Be'eno Mino 60 won't help, it can't help in the
right.
Mino as well.
That's correct. That's correct. That's it. Just like over there, it doesn't work. It's like a gzeira, right? So it's a gzeira. So here too, we're mishayr. Don't think you can get away with it b'minoi. No, the whole idea was be'eno mino, or because of an eno mino potential.
And with that in mind, how could with that in mind?
According to the Isser Beheter.
Because of the Rabbanan?
Right. Yeah. I think it's because of the Isser Beheter. I'm not sure. He brings down the Torah's Chatas, but I think it has to do because of the Isser Beheter. Okay, this is pretty much the points that I just wanted to clarify from Sif Ches in the Ramah. We went on to other things. We went on to whiskey, if you remember.
Oh yeah, that was very interesting.
Yeah.
The whiskey part. We actually made a little taste test.
I apologize.
Sure.
Because you were right of Blumenkranz.
Right.
Is not a problem.
Oh, the blended whiskey
Scotch.
generally.
Scotch.
And I have Scotch, so.
You know, it's different, yeah. You know what Scotch is? In Scotland.
Yes.
Yeah. It's different. Yeah.
No, with the Scottish. We
All
never
right.
did a taste test with you.
Okay, we need to do a taste.
To have
So next time we have to bring here whiskeys.
Yeah.
And wines. So we
Maybe
can become kafelas. No, we can become kafelas. Yeah. Okay, let's go on just briefly. Go ahead. Yeah.
if you have 60 cans, you have, let's say, milk and if you have this, sir,
Yeah.
and that taste, in general case, not with spice, about that taste,
Yeah, according to some, yes. According to some, no.
does it not is there spicy?
What's the scenario? What's
I don't know, let's say the whole thing is spicy.
the food is spicy?
The food is spicy.
What's
There's
the isser?
I don't know. About 160 of meat. The whole thing is spicy.
And because it's spicy, what do you feel?
What?
But you're not feeling the chalev more because of the spice. Right. That was a Taz. We spoke about the Taz. The Taz says there's a lot of other food items that give flavor. It doesn't have to be a spice. Chalev, he says shuman.
Yep.
There's other things that flavor the dish, the soup. Why only say spice? What if you feel it? You know, so he says there's a difference between flavoring that contribute to the general overall flavor of the dish. You feel it, it's softer, it's smoother, it's tastier because of it. But can you identify the particular chalev? No, not beyond 60. There are certain tavlinim that you can identify them beyond shishim. Those are milsa david latama.
Like spices is not
It's in a separate category.
It's a separate issue.
Separate category, right.
Okay.
So separate category, yeah. Okay, let's go on just a little bit. Not just the kitzur to see test, because as I said earlier, there's a lot of issues to cover here, a lot of points, various scenarios that this could really apply. Maybe before we read the Mechaber and the Ramah, maybe let me tell you what we're talking about here. Sif tests were being introduced to a concept which is really a machloikes with some say, it appears to be a machloikes the Rosh and the Rambam, but it's also machloikes in the Gemara too. You have two places. Now, if you want to do your homework a little bit, I encourage that, because you would understand the whole sugya a lot better, and there's a lot of things to cover here. There's a Mishnah in Orla, and there's a Gemara in Zvachim. And you have the following, I guess we can call it, dilemma. Is it possible that one Isser can cancel out another Isser? That's what we're going to be talking about. One Isser versus another one. Why would it make a difference? It can make a difference in various situations. Let's say you have 59 heter. Okay? 59 heter. And you have two pieces of Isurim, kazais, right? Two pieces falling in. They're different. Okay? Now keep in mind, if you really want to get into it, this is going to bring you back, you're going to have a deja vu. Keep in mind that when we say different, it would help a little bit to remember or to recall the famous Ramah. What makes things min b'minu? Is it the name or the flavor? It helps a little bit. You don't need to go back to that Ramah, but it helps to keep in mind that too. All right? So you have two different kinds of Isurim falling in. Chelev and Dam. Okay? Falling into the 59. Now, I know what the halacha would be if the chelev by itself would fall in. I know what the halacha would be if the dam itself would fall in, but the two falling in at the same time, would they have to fall in at the same time? Let's see what are the possibilities here. Falling in at the same time. Okay, well, now we have a problem. We have the two together are not batul b'shishim. If they go together?
Do they add up?
Do they add up as one big isser? And no, I don't have shishim keneged both of them. I do have shishim against each one. Only when do I have shishim against each one? If I include the other one. In other words, I don't have shishim against either one.
In the heter.
Right, in the heter. Okay? Or let's say I do. Here's another scenario. I do have shishim against one. I do. But when the next Isser falls in, can I use the whole entire shishim now, that part of it is Isser, to cancel out this?
In other words, in order for me now to have 60 against the new Isser, what was 60 against the old Isser is insufficient, but I have to add the old Isser itself to have a new 60.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a complicated scenario.
You see what I mean? There are various scenarios. Right. And it's not so simple. From the Mechaber, you don't see all of these scenarios. You see one or two.
Let's try to understand the easy first.
Yeah, you see one or two, but there are quite a few. All right? Let me give you another example. Let's say you have Basar and Challah falling in, each one separately. Into Parv, right. And you don't have enough in one to cancel out either one. Okay?
So in the Parv, you don't have enough either the Basar or the Challah.
Or the Challah. Now, if they fall in together, I may have a problem of Chanan. If it's not bottle. But what happens if they fall in separately? Right?
Is it Choseh v'Niyah?
Okay, that leads to the next question. Okay? What if they fall in separately? The meat fell in. Okay?
Now, according to the Rosh, if I had 60 against the meat, the meat was never. It's the meat isn't in it. What problem do I have?
They combine later on together.
But first of all, the meat isn't.
Right now, it's not.
Yeah, so I don't need 60.
Right.
60 against the meat doesn't accomplish it.
Exactly.
I have potatoes with me.
Right. So later on, you have the milk falling in. Do we say that they combine together now?
Well, do I have 60 against the milk?
Well, of course, that's.
Is the potatoes and meat together?
No.
I don't have 60.
That's going to.
The potatoes and the meat together, I don't have 60.
That's depending on how much fell in. Exactly. You see, you have to. That's what we're going to be analyzing. We're going to be analyzing Chanan. Do we say in these situations Chanan or not, or do we not say Chanan? Does it make a difference if they fall together or not? Because I'll tell you why. There's another thing that we must keep in mind, and I think that you covered it in Basar b'Cholov. Yeah, Basar b'Cholov. Remember Niddah v'she'ino Niddah?
Yeah. That's
an interesting concept in itself. And you're going to see that we don't apply it across the board. Sometimes it basically makes no difference.
According to the Ramah, even in Basar b'Cholov, because we required 100. No.
Well, that's only according to Bechaber, it makes a difference. According to Ramah, you're right, it doesn't, not that the Ramah doesn't hold of Noida She'eino Noida, just over there, he's not makbid at all. But this Noida She'eino Noida, did I know the first time around that the Isser fell, or did I not? Okay? An Isser fell in. Then another Isser fell in. Okay? Now, the first Isser was this battle. Okay? The first Isser was this battle. Now, right, but by the time the second piece fell in, it's not battle. Well, maybe it is, because right now, the original that was mevatel, the first Isser, it's all heter. Remember the Rosh?
Yes.
Isser becomes heter. Can I use that to mevatel the second time around? Does it make a difference, noida or lo noida? Like by Mechaber Basar v'chalav. Why should it make a difference? Because there's a halacha of choize v'nir that we will be talking about later on. And let me just quote to you a shach. In Siman Tzadik Tes. Isur shenizbata, the Ramah says, Isur shenizbata, kigon shoyo shishin kenegdoi. Alright? Later on in Toisa boy, achakach, mina Isur harishoin, listen carefully, later on from the same Isur, I have falling in again, choize v'nir. And the Ramah says, I don't care if it's min b'mino, min b'she'eno mino, lach belach, yovish, makes no difference. Lo ishna noida b'ntayim or lo noida b'ntayim, if it's the same Isser or the same kind, it's what we always say choize v'nir.
Even if I realize
In other words, if a piece of pork fell in, and it was bottle, you can't see it, of course. It's bottle, it's gone. I don't recognize it. A couple hours later, right, another piece of pork fell in. Big piece. I don't see it. I don't know. It's all shredded. It's all that, whatever. But I only have shishim if I use the original piece that fell in. Everybody holds. The first time around, it's bottled. The pork was bottled. Everybody holds. Whether they'll eat it or not, I don't. That's a different story. But that it's bottled, it's bottled.
the way through the food processor.
Yes, well, it's bottled. But now, more fell in. So the original is grew. If you really think about it, now you have a couple pounds of pork in that mixer, maybe. But if you say that the whole thing is bottled, can I use that against the second time or not? So the Ramah says, no, you can't if it's the same Isser. If it's the same type.
But now, even if I have 60 in the header without adding the first, if I understood the grammar correct, even then it would.
One more time, if what?
Even in the header, I had against the second is, but not against both of them. Then, without being mitzaref, the first
No.
completely, it still wouldn't work.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that. The first time there was shishin connected what fell in.
And the second time also, without being mitzaref,
I have to be mitzaref the
Oh, you
Isser.
have to be mitzaref. Is
Yes.
that what the Ramah says?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
I understand.
Right. Because, in other words, I have to be mitzaref the...
If I'm not mitzaref, it's not chazer v'niyot.
No, but 1 second. But in your situation, let me see which one the Ramah was talking about over here. Isur shenizbat, because it could be maybe that too. Isur shenizbat, can go show you shishim kenegdo v'nitoisav boi la'achakach mina isur harishon. Choize v'nir. In the case of choize v'nir, we're talking about choize v'nir, the original isur.
Right, exactly.
Okay, in that case, there are two different examples then, right? I was talking about what we're going to be learning next. All right, but you're right.
So how that factors in next one?
Yes, there is a situation where I need to know whether I could be metzaref. That's the sugi of can I be metzaref, what was there to be mevatel. And here, I'm sorry, yes, you're right. And in the Ramah, we're talking about a different situation, the scenario of choize v'nir, that which was there before, I don't have enough against both of them together. So that you're right. However, the Shach makes a point that's only, like the Ramah pointed out, min b'minoi. It's the same one. Haino dafka b'min isur echad, aval shnei mini isur shechalukim betamo kol echad mevatel tam chavero. But if you have pork and then you have chaylev, one can cancel each other out because what are we concerned ultimately is with tam. And whenever the main issue is tam, not the name, like yain nesach, right? When the main prohibition, the main problem is the tam, one cancels out. It's a fact that one gets rid of the other one. If one gets rid of the other one, then you don't say it. The choize v'nir wouldn't apply. If choize v'nir doesn't apply, then the Ramah later on can help us understand a little bit what we're talking about over here. that maybe there is such a thing as a heter mitztaref, Hisurim can be mitztaref to be mevatel. Right? To be mevatel, in other words, each other. Cancel each other out, like you learn in algebra, you cancel out each other. Right? If they're not the same. Now, why not? Because what's the problem of being the same? Remember Rabbi Yehuda? What's Rabbi Yehuda's svara? Why shouldn't min b'mino be bottle? What's so special about min b'mino? Remember that? And which Rashi holds like. What's so special about min b'mino? Tam ki ikir, I understand. So you have min b'she'eno mino, you need shishim, but min b'mino should not be bottle. Why should it be so serious? All right, but what's the svara? No, there is. We covered it. The svara is.
The Ron says, for instance.
What's the svara? Because it's become stronger. Remember the svara?
That was on the Ron.
Yeah. If you have two of the same, on the contrary, they're not. They become stronger. They become stronger, then it's not bottle, then it's choizer v'nir. Perhaps that's the idea of why you say choizer v'nir b'chlal. And this is a big shaila in Pesach.
Yeah.
Right? On Pesach, we'll talk.
Is it the origin, the source of veneer, or is it just an?
That's where where it's very much discussed in Pesach. Yeah, and this one area of Hilchos Taaruvot, you don't really find choizer v'nir everywhere. You have it in Pesach. You have it here later on. That's it. I think that's it. Go ahead.
Let's say you have.
Oh, by the way, you may have it by yain. What happens if you dilute it and you pour more? It could be. Does it reconstitute again? Yes.
Let's say you have this issue of 59, and you say the same kind, you say name. So let's say it's a piece of chuck.
Right.
Okay? Let's say that's kosher shkita.
Right.
Let's say another piece of.
Okay.
But somehow, I don't know how the scenario would be, but I'm wondering, is meat injected properly? It's a kosher animal.
It's the same tarfus, the same isser, the same type of isser.
The tom can be a vela or a piece of kosher meat.
Right, exactly. That's why I mentioned that Ramon. Remember, what determines min b'mino? Is it the shame or is it the tam? And we said that it's an extra chumrah that the Ramon is really saying. That as long as two things have the same name, that's what renders them min b'minoi. Okay, that. In other words, that would be enough to render them min b'minoi. As in other words, what? Well, obviously, whenever the taste is quite different, okay, then it's not going to make a difference that they have the same name anyway. We said. Because how could the remote go against everybody? If you have two different things that taste differently, you're obviously going to go by the taste. But he was being machmer, that even, because usually when things have different names, they have different tam. Usually, that's what the Aruch HaShulchan explains that. When things have different names, they have different tam. So I don't have to say you go by, it's obvious. Well, he was being mechadash, he was being machmer, that how do you determine if things are min b'mino? You don't base it on the tam, because some things can be a little bit different. A little bit, slightly different. You have to, if they have the same name, they're min b'minoi. And therefore, if they have the same name, they're still a little bit different, you would be machmer. To be, in other words...
So the same name crosses out the slight...
Yes, the slight difference. Yes. In other words, that will help you determine. You want to know what min b'minoi is.
If it has the same taste, there's nothing to talk about.
Exactly.
You have 50 different names.
Yeah.
It's the same taste.
No.
Done.
Right.
But if it's not the same taste, you're not already safe.
You're not safe.
The same taste, if it has the same name, then even though it's slightly different in taste, it could still be min.
Yeah, the Ramah was only trying to help us without any reference to that Gemara and the Machlekes of Shem and Tam, just helping us how to identify min b'minoi. In other words, you don't go by if things taste similar or not. Because if they have different names, they're going to be min b'sheino mino. Even though they may taste somewhat a little bit the same. I'm going to be machmir if they have different names.
Lenient.
No, I'm lenient if they have the same name. That's what he's saying. But what he's trying to say is he's trying to say that I'm going to judge if things are min b'mino only if they're the same name. If they have different names,
and they taste different
and they
from
don't,
each other.
and they even though they taste close to each other,
close but different,
right? It's still going to be min b'sheino minoi. And this has to. Why does he have to tell us this? There are situations where you may have wines, or certain things.
Is this a range of just one dot in that range? Let's say a combination in a melon. I'm talking about wines.
Well, that could be. That was one of the scenarios that we had. That was
they have different names.
Right. That was the machlokes. That was the question in the Gemara. Remember, yain, if it was new, if it was old.
Well, there you have
Right.
there you
Sure.
have a whole different.
That's where the
liquid.
sugya
One
comes.
is
That is where it came from, and that is why the Achronim said, "What is the Ramah talking about?"
So my
Yeah,
question
we do
is,
go by
is
Tom.
taste, when we're talking about a range, that wine can taste a little like this, a little like that, it's still no? Or are we talking about a particular point in that? If it's over here, the taste of wine, then it's one meaning. If it's over here in the range of taste, then it's already a different meaning.
That's why I think that's exactly what I said. Because we don't really know, sometimes it's hard to know
So
the range.
because both are called wine,
Yeah,
it's mean Benito,
yeah, so-
or because one is called Cabernet and the other one Merlot.
Right. So because of these kind of scenarios, the Ramah had to point out that in determining bin b'mini, we're going to go by the name.
So which name do I go by? Wine or Cabernet Sauvignon?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you also like it?
Yeah. Anyway, we would obviously we most likely would go by the wine. I don't know if you can really tell that much of a difference, especially if there's a little bit. One is dry and one is sweet, maybe.
A little more dry, a little sweet.
Well, if the sweet and dry, then that's
A little.
a
No,
little
no,
bit.
barely
Yeah.
noticeable.
Right.
So if
Right.
you had 60
Right.
You notice it very much.
Yeah.
against a chuck, let's say
Right.
the Vela chuck, the non-kosher chuck.
As long as it's not chaticha riulis kabed, as long as it's not a
Fine.
big piece, right?
Fine. So that's mean Bamino.
Yes.
Mean
No. Why be'enamino? One was. Did you say one was a treifa? They were both meat. They're different. They're different.
Chuck and chuck.
They're different nisurim. If you were to tell me something else, you tell me I have here a piece of meat. One is a nevela and one is a treifa.
I'm saying the Vela.
Okay, that's two different kinds of isurim. Even though in reality they're very very similar.
Saying the Vela, 60
Yeah.
kosher chuck against mean Bamino, because it's right. The rice, so you have to have. Is that mean?
Why? You have meat and meat.
Mean Bamino?
Yes.
Even when one isn't.
Yes.
It's still Bamino. Okay.
Right.
I heard about that.
Right. So anyway, these are some of the questions that we're going to come up. Just to read the Mechaber, we'll just read the Mechaber. A Kedera pat that has sheish bo 59 nun tes zeisim heter, 59 heter. V'noflu bo beis zeisim echot shel dam v'echot shel chelev. You have two zeisim falling in, one of blood and one of chelev. So there are two different kinds of isurim. Kol echot mitztaref im a nun tes, each one by itself is mistaref with the 59 shel heter. Levatel chavero, to cancel out. Now they're falling at the same time. Levatel chavero, to cancel out the other. So together you have 60 against each one. V'chein choftei zeisim shel heter shenofal bohem kazayis chelev. So you have 29 and one kazayis chelev. Ubigdero acheres hayu shloishim shel heter. You have 30 in another pot with nofal toichel kazayis shel dam, of blood. Right. V'nisarvu b'shoigeg, and he got mixed up b'shoigeg. It's mutter, because now they'll still cancel each other. Now it says b'shoigeg because we'll learn later on that you're not allowed to be mevatel isur lechatchila. Right? So that has to be b'shoigeg. What happens b'mezit, we'll learn it in the next Siman Tzadik Tes. B'chol shekin b'beizeisin Ramo says echot shel gvino, v'echot shel basar, one cheese and one meat. They call echot mevatel chavero. You see? So each one by themselves can possibly be mevatel the other. How does this work? What's the dynamics of isur mevatel isur? That's what we're going to talk about hopefully by Thursday. It's a big sugya. Yeah, I mean, in reality, is it always true? There are cases where we will see from the Mishnah that it's not so. There is a case, for example, by Truma, that even though it's midrabanan, that even though it's botel, you have to remove part of it. Because it's gezel, you're taking away from the kohen. So even though you say it's bittul so you can eat the rest. But to remove, you would have to remove. And this is similar, of course, to where you actually see the Isser. When you actually see the Isser, regardless, you always have to remove. We're only concerned about the plitas, when they plitas or not. So let's say you have enough in the cholent to be mevatel, whatever fell in. You still got to remove the Isser if you see it. And remember that famous Ramah with the smetana? with the chelev? If there's any way that you can remove the Isser, you have to make it float to the top.
You know, if it's removable, it's as though it was.
It's be'ain. It's like you see it be'ain. Right. Yeah. So anyway, so sif, the last seif, I think we should talk about it just by itself, without anything else. The various scenarios of how one can cancel out. Do we say one cancels out the other, or one does not cancel out the other? When do we say choizer v'nir, even though choizer v'nir is something that comes up later? In order to fully understand the sif, I think we have to cover all these concepts. Because if you say choizer v'nir, that means, wait a minute, it's not gone? I thought it was gone. All of a sudden, it reawakens?
But that would contradict the law, because the law says it converted into.
Right, I mean, that's the issue. I mean, why do we say such a thing as Choizer Veneer? But think about it.
Does the law also hold that-
Choizer Veneer means that you currently are able to detect the tam, which you may not have been able to do before. Okay?
It's not so surprising.
Yeah.
Because if I have a soup in front of me and I put in a spoon worth of
Right.
salt,
Right.
and the spoon doesn't taste salty enough, I put in another half a teaspoon.
Eventually you'll feel
and
it.
all of a sudden it's sufficient.
Exactly.
Now, half a teaspoon is less than a spoon. A spoon didn't make it. Why did a half a spoon make it? Because it
Right.
adds up in the soup.
Right.
So
It's not so surprising, exactly, on the one hand, but it has to be min b'minoi.
yeah, I don't.
That is very important to keep in mind, because if it's not minoi, which is going to help us a lot on this, because the good thing about this seif, the only easy thing is that we're not talking about min b'minoi here. We're talking about different things completely. So it's easier to comprehend the concept of isu mevatel iser. But the whole idea of isu mevatel iser is also very interesting. How does that happen? They're both aser, but they're aser for different
I was
reasons.
going to ask you, exactly I was going to ask you.
Right,
When we say Isser Mevatel Dir,
right,
we're constantly talking about six as a taste.
right.
Now I can see that something that's sour
Right.
would be Mevatel something that's sweet, even both are
Correct.
both are Isurim.
Right.
But it comes to being Mevatel the substance in Roy. Does Isser still Mevatel Isser?
I'm not sure what you mean by the
Well, I can
substance.
see physically, how an Isser that is sweet, because of its, would be mevatel the sour taste of an Isser that is sour.
Okay.
And when we're talking about 60, we're talking about taste.
Yes.
So I understand that if I need 60, and
Right.
one is sour and one is sweet, so
Right.
the sweetness of the sweet will be mevatel the sourness of the sour Isser.
Right. Oh,
And
okay.
the sourness
I see
of
what
the
you're
sour
saying.
Isser will be mevatel the sweetness.
Versus
But
substance.
When it comes beroiv, when I talk about substance,
Yes.
then this is Aser and this is Aser,
Oh.
and I'm not so sure anymore.
Oh,
I can understand
right.
physically
Very good.
why one Isser would be mevatel
So
the
now,
other Isser.
now you're touching on, I think it's the Dagul Meravava or one of them that says that even the Rambam would agree here with the Rosh. In other words, but there is a shita that says that the Rambam that says that Ein Isur, Rambam holds Ein Isur Mevatel Isur. Okay? But here maybe he's masking, because here it's only an issue of tam. See? We'll go into this on Thursday. All right.
Go ahead.